They said I was exempt. I still got the bill. I was told I was exempt. Council tax? Students don't pay that, they said. So I moved into my little off-campus flat, focused on lectures and library runs, and didn't give it a second thought. Then a letter came through the door, then another. I ignored them until one wasn't just a bill, it was a threat. Apparently, I owed over 100. And the council? They were coming for it through my scholarship fund. If I was exempt, why were they chasing me like I was dodging rent? That's when I realized no one tells you how this really works. I landed in the UK in September, suitcase full of jumpers and ambition. First-year international student, fresh start, new world. Found a tiny flat near campus, not halls, just a studio with enough space to burn toast and still call it cooking. Letting agent seemed chilled. We signed the papers, and when I asked about bills, he said, "Oh, don't worry, you're a full-time student. You'll be exempt from council tax." Sounded official enough. No follow-up, no mention of forms or calls. Just vibes. So I moved in, sorted my Wi-Fi, picked up my student ID, and dove straight into lectures. I was adjusting to life in a new country, budgeting, meal prepping, figuring out which buses actually come when they say they will. Council tax? I filed it under things I don't need to think about. Then, about a month in, a letter showed up. Council tax bill 95 due this month. I laughed. Actually laughed. They must have got it wrong. I remembered what the agent said. Students are exempt. So I ignored it. Probably just a system error. 2 weeks later, another letter, then one marked final notice. Red ink, thicker envelope, and the tone? Different. No longer polite. Now it was, immediate payment required, legal recovery may follow. Now I wasn't laughing. I started to panic, but quietly. You don't want to look clueless in a new country. I thought maybe the university would handle it, or maybe it would sort itself out. Spoiler, it didn't. I reread the tenancy contract. Nothing about tax. I checked my uni emails. Still nothing. Flatmates in nearby buildings were just as confused. One said, "Oh, I just bin them. They never chase it." Comforting. Not really. I had a scholarship, a visa. I couldn't afford to mess around with this stuff. I had no idea what I'd done wrong and no clue what was coming next. I started feeling ashamed. I was on a scholarship, top of my class, the one who always handed in assignments early, and yet, here I was, dodging letters like they were eviction notices. Each time that brown envelope with the council logo hit the doormat, my chest tightened. I went back to the letting agent's emails. Nothing. No mention of forms, exemption certificates, nothing that said, "Here's what you actually need to do." Just a breezy. Yeah, students are exempt. It was said with the confidence of a man who's never had to prove his exemption in a foreign country. I asked my course mates, no one knew. One girl said, "I just throw those away. They stop after a while." But they didn't stop. They multiplied. The more I ignored them, the worse it got. First the reminders, then threats of legal action. At one point, I opened a letter that said, "Notice of court proceedings." I didn't even understand what half of it meant, but the bold lettering screamed, "You're in trouble." But the worst part? I couldn't bring myself to call. What if I'd done something horribly wrong? What if it affected my visa? My funding? What if someone said, "You were supposed to handle this months ago. You've forfeited your exemption"? I'd sit in lectures distracted, wondering if the next letter would be the one that finished me. I stopped telling anyone, pretended everything was fine, smiled, studied, submitted my essays, all while avoiding my post like it had teeth. I wasn't scared of paying a bill. I was scared I'd somehow broken the rules in a country where one mistake could cost me my education. I was scared that all it took was one misstep, one form. I didn't know I needed to lose everything I came here for. And worst of all, I still didn't know how to fix it. Then the worst happened. An email from the university's finance office, subject line, "Council tax inquiry, action required." I opened it with trembling hands. Apparently the council had contacted them directly. They'd flagged my account as in arrears. The uni was now reviewing my scholarship eligibility because of my outstanding debt. 100. That's how much they said I owed. It wasn't just a red letter anymore, it was real money, real consequences. My living allowance? The little money I had budgeted out in careful weekly chunks now under threat. I stared at the screen, reading the email over and over, trying to process. I felt my chest tighten, like someone had tied a string around my lungs and pulled. I grabbed my bag, walked straight out of the study room, and locked myself in a library toilet cubicle. And I cried. Not because of the amount, though it was a lot, but because of the fear, the helplessness, the realization that one quiet mistake, one form I didn't know I had to send was now big enough to derail everything. This wasn't a gym membership you could cancel. This was the kind of thing that followed you. That stayed on your record. And all I could hear in my head was, you should have dealt with this months ago. But I didn't know how. No one tells you about this stuff when you move countries. Everyone assumes you'll just figure it out. And that was the breaking point. Not the bill, not the debt, not the threat to my scholarship. The breaking point was realizing no one was coming to save me. If I didn't deal with this now properly, completely, it could cost me everything I came to the UK for. So I wiped my face, went back to my room, sat at my desk, and finally started facing it. That night, I did what I should have done weeks ago. I laid every letter out on my desk. All of them. The bills, the reminders, the red stamped threats, I stacked them in order. Then I opened Google and started translating every line I didn't understand. Notice of enforcement. Liability order. Single occupancy discount. I took notes like it was an exam. Finally, I dialed the number on the last letter. I waited on hold for 47 minutes, listening to classical music interrupted by, "You are number 8 in the queue." When someone finally picked up, I blurted out everything: my student status, my confusion, my fear. The woman on the line was polite but firm. She asked, "Did you ever submit your student exemption certificate?" My heart dropped. "Wait, what certificate?" I asked. That's when it hit me. Being a full-time student doesn't automatically exempt you. You have to prove it. Submit a certificate to the council from your university. No form equals no exemption. No one tells you that. Not the letting agent, not the uni welcome pack, but the system expects you to just know. So the next morning, I marched into student services. I explained everything. The advisor printed the certificate, signed it, stamped it. I scanned it, uploaded it, and sent it to the council along with a long, nervous email. I explained I was new to the UK, unaware of the paperwork, misinformed by my agent, and scared of doing the wrong thing. I asked them kindly, clearly, to consider writing off the bill. Then I waited. Days passed, then weeks, and then an email. Subject, council tax account update. I opened it, barely breathing. We acknowledge receipt of your student certificate. Your account has been reviewed and your balance has been cleared. No payment is required. I sat there and stared. They'd written off the £100. No bailiffs, no deduction from my scholarship, just gone. Not because I cried, not because I begged, but because I finally had the right piece of paper. That was the moment I learned something important about living in the UK. This country doesn't forgive ignorance, but it respects paperwork. If you've got the form, the evidence, the email trail, you've got a fighting chance. If you don't, it's all too easy to drown in a system that doesn't pause to explain itself. And from that day on, I swore I'd never make another assumption about what everyone knows. Now, I'm that person, the one who won't shut up about council tax in every group chat for new students. Anytime I meet a fresher moving into private accommodation, I ask one question: have you sent your exemption certificate to the council? Blank stares, every time. So I explain it calmly, clearly, like no one ever did for me. I even saved the council's form link in my notes app, just in case. Because it turns out, so many students don't know, they think it's automatic. They think their landlord sorted it. They think a red letter is just admin noise. I've helped 5 flatmates get exempt in the last year. One of them had 3 months of bills piling up before they told me. I sat with them, called the council on speaker, and we sorted it. Another was about to be charged as a working adult because the council thought their course was part-time. We fixed that too. The wildest one? I spotted an error on someone's tenancy. The landlord had listed them as the sole occupant, but they were in a shared house. If that had gone through, they would have been liable for 100% of the council tax, not just their portion. They were days away from bailiff action. What started as a personal failure, something that left me crying in a library bathroom, somehow became a weird little superpower. I even posted about it in a student survival forum and got 80 comments. Turns out people are desperate for someone to explain this stuff in normal English. No jargon, no condescension, just one person who's been through the system and lived to tell the tale. Now, when I hear that thud of post through the door, I don't panic, because I know what's real and what's noise. And every time I help someone else avoid that panic, even just once, it feels like I took all that stress and turned it into something useful. Looking back, I wasn't careless. I wasn't ignoring responsibilities. I was uninformed in a system that assumes you already know how everything works. That's the thing about being new to the UK. You miss things locals take for granted. There's no handbook for basic adulting in a new country. They said I was exempt, and I was. But no one told me that exemptions don't apply automatically. You have to prove it. You have to find the form, fill it in, get it stamped, and send it off on time. No one walks you through it. And if you miss a step, the system doesn't ask why, it just charges you. Here's the moral of the story. Don't assume anything, especially when it involves money, housing, or government letters in the UK. Ask the dumb question. Call the council, send the form. The cost of doing nothing is almost always higher than the cost of asking for help. Embarrassment lasts 5 minutes. Bailiff fees, court orders, that kind of stress sticks. You're not alone, you're not incompetent. The system just isn't built for clarity. But you can beat it with the right info and one very boring but powerful superpower: paperwork. New to the UK? Renting off campus? Unsure what you owe or if you owe anything at all? You're not stupid. The system's just confusing on purpose. Follow the Council Tax Insider for real stories, plain English, and steps that can stop a red letter from ruining your week. And subscribe if you've ever stared at one of those letters thinking, surely this isn't for me? Because sometimes it is. And it helps to know what to do before it shows up at your door.